Hello and welcome to the Shadow Chronicles, the podcast where we take a deep dive into the inner work, generational trauma and your shadows. Having the hard conversations so you don't have to. You know, the shit that doesn't get talked about. My name is Sky. I'm a shadow integration specialist and I'm here to guide you so you can unfuck yourself by doing the shadow work, healing the generational trauma so you can vibrate with confidence and fucking enjoy your life. And my co-host
is Todd. I am an integrative health coach who helps people own more of who they are and change their lives on many different levels to become who they really are. Find your compass and follow it, to say it simply.
And we've hit episode 4. We're still here. And we are going to talk about shadow and emotions because essentially that is like the start of shadow work.
And just like the shadow, we're not going away.
Always here. No.
Sorry, it was just like episode 4. It's like, yeah, we're still here. It's like, yeah, we're not going away. Sorry. Shadow and emotions.
Right.
They strike me as being so interwoven it's not funny, because the whole point of putting something into your shadow is an emotionally driven behavior, in the same way that anything that comes out of the shadow is an emotionally triggered behavior.
Right.
It occurs to me to sort of then ask the question, well, why do we as humans do anything? Emotion. Yeah. And
to say that it's, you don't do shit by emotions, bullshit.
I was listening to, do you know who Chris Voss is?
Yep.
Okay. So he was talking about this idea that there is no such thing as reason, in that the objectivity that we think we have as a otherwise rational, upwards facing, objective-ish human, even all of those rationalizations and reasonings that we have still demand an emotional component to it.
Yeah.
There's only one kind of person who doesn't have that, and that's a legitimate neurodivergent psychopath, because they just do not have the hardware for it. But even then, it looks like they can think empathy, even if they don't feel empathy.
They can act it.
That.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, emotions. And there's other steps in terms of, like, the research suggests that it's so interwoven that the ability to divorce one from the other, it doesn't happen like that. To the point where you're probably going to have better luck divorcing your thoughts than your emotions.
Right. And even, this is really interesting because even when people shut down their emotions, and they disconnect them, like we spoke about in the last episode, like shutting those doors, barricading those doors up, all of those sort of things, like, no, I don't have this, all of that sort of stuff. It still comes out somehow.
Well,
and, like, even if you have completely shut down to the point that you've so far dissociated and you're so far numb, you're still going to have physical sensations within the body.
I think I said something along the lines of, like, when you put something into the shadow, you are effectively creating a conscious blind spot. And that's, I think, very much what you were just describing now, is that even though you've completely disregarded all of this, and this, it doesn't mean it's not happening to you. It doesn't mean it's not there.
Yeah.
It absolutely is. Just because you don't acknowledge it doesn't mean it's not a thing.
Yeah, exactly. Or it's, as I said, coming out in another way, or, all of that sort of stuff. But I really wanted to sort of dive into, emotions, potentially regulation, and the shadow, because I find this is a really cool place to start for people that are wanting to look into their shadow or look into shadow work themselves, because it's like that, when you put the toe in the water to see if it's cold or not, rather than just like diving straight in, it's like that, it's a lot easier to identify and accept your emotions because everybody has them, rather than accepting traits and behaviors and shadow selves.
It's a more connective, like relatable place to start.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
With your thinky face on.
No, it just occurred to me that it's valuable because the analogy that you just gave in terms of do you just drive straight in, there's allegedly a blank point. So let's just say you're handed something that's got an extremity of temperature. So it's hot or cold. It takes you a few moments to appreciate if it's hot or cold beyond the extremity of the sensation. Mm-hmm. And I'd argue that emotions are very similar. You feel an extremity of intense feeling, but the necessity of sitting with it to acknowledge it and appreciate where it's come from. That's what I think you're talking about.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because there's like the first step of regulation, for example. Well, when I work with people, when I get them to start identifying it, and like the first step is to literally identify. You haven't actually processed, you haven't regulated, you haven't done any of that. It's just literally fucking identifying it.
What is the problem? What are we dealing with?
Yeah, exactly. What are you feeling rather than just like fucking shutting it off? You know, actually say, I am angry, or I am sad, or I'm grieving, or I'm frustrated, or I'm happy, or I'm joyful. 9 times out of 10, though, we're dealing with like, you know, the harder negative, in quotation marks, emotions.
To put it simply, like to be able to articulate those, requires a level of like emotional intelligence and sophistication and maturity that like not many people have.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you're almost training them to do.
Well, when you've been taught for, you know, your lifetime that you're not allowed these things, you're not allowed to be angry, you're not allowed to be sad, like, you know, fucking trigger warning, age old, like, don't cry, I'll give you something to fucking cry about. Mm-hmm. You know, like what does that teach you? It teaches you're not allowed to be sad, or you're not allowed to cry, you know, whether that's male, whether that's female. So what do? You fucking shut it down. And you're like, oh, I don't cry, that's for pussies. And stuff like that. Or, you know, if you were taught that, you know, a lot of the times I find in women, they're taught like being angry is a bad thing, in quotation marks, you know. And
which is where the mum guilt from yelling at the kids really comes from.
Right. There's another one that comes from that too, which is super interesting. But yeah, so what do? You shut that down and you just like, you know, pretend that you're not an angry person, or...
Sorry, I was just thinking of another example of those where, you know how you would ask, I'm hungry, what is there to eat? And your mum will say like, oh, there's an apple. It's like, I don't want to eat that. Well, you mustn't be hungry then. And I guess, you know, the knock-on effect of that could be like it's a less intense version of the, you know, shut up or I'll give you something to cry about. But it's also that, does that tell you as a child that... Yeah,
why are you sad? You've got nothing to be sad about. Or why are you angry? You've got nothing to be angry about.
Your preferences at that point. It's like, no, I want a donut. Yeah, but if you don't want to eat this, you can't be hungry. You know, it's like it's a dismissal of the ability to acknowledge your own preferences, let alone feelings that drive those.
Yeah, you've essentially been conditioned that your feelings are not your feelings, or you're not allowed to have those feelings. So therefore, you know, or, you know, even worse, you get in trouble for having those feelings. Yeah. So, you know, especially children are incredibly versatile, smart, intelligent, spongy creatures, right? And because their frontal lobe's not fully developed, all they want is to make mum and dad happy. Like, and if...
It's the focal point of the universe.
Right.
They just haven't had the time and develop the sophistication to think anything other than that.
You know, and if you get in trouble for, you know, showing some sort of emotion, whether that's anger, sadness, you know, anxiety, whatever the case may be, and that is dismissed, or you get in trouble like, you know, why are you angry for? You got nothing to be angry about, and stuff like that, then what happens is that child then internalizes and they go, oh, there must be something wrong with me.
Emotions are bad.
Emotions are bad. They make mum or dad mad. that just rhymed. So to make sure that
So you heard it here first, guys. Sky is this far away from writing a shadow work kids book. No pressure.
Can I write my shadow work book first and then we'll work on the kids?
Fine.
I just admitted that. They then go, oh, well, what do I need to do to make, mum and dad happy again? Well, that is to not show that emotion. That is to not behave like that. That is to not act like that. So you shut that down.
Yeah. Like what 7-year-old understands that the parent's reaction is a reflection of their own feeling state, not a social commentary on the child and their feeling sate.
Right.
Like who's sophisticated? Like how many adults are sophisticated enough to recognize that really?
Well, that's it. That's it exactly. Welcome to my profession. But yeah, so they then, it's internalize because that's it. That emotional reaction, from the parents to the child for having an emotion is a trigger to their parents' own shadow, and the cycle continues.
Generational curses, right?
Right, exactly. So then that child grows up, with that belief because, that's been stamped into them enough fucking times that it becomes their own then they've internalized and believe the fact that, one, I'm not an angry person because if I get angry, no one will like me, no one will love me. I will get abandoned. All of the above.
It's basically the same thing, right? Just different layers of the same stink.
So in order to do that, we, have to shut that down. But unfortunately, what happens when we shut a part of ourselves down, all the things that part is there for get shut down with it. Yeah. So essentially let's say, for example, your intuition, your gut instinct, all of those sort of things. There is a technical term for it. I can't pronounce it, unfortunately, because that will kick my dyslexia brain in and we'll be here for a while.
I kind of want to ask you to try, but that's unnecessarily cruel and
right.
needless.
But, anger can be kicked off by your gut instinct because that is there to tell you that something's not right,
Stuff needs doing. This, I'm not safe, all of those sort of, things to tell you, to warn you to, hey, you need to, listen to me here as I'm, pointing to my gut. That gets shut down too, and every time that you get angry, it gets dismissed, you're overreacting, hello, gaslighting 101. Boundary setting is nigh on impossible.
Right, exactly, because all of those sort of functions get shut down because you've shut down that part of yourself. All of those positive functions get shut down.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned in the last episode, all of the counteractive of that, so, making sure everyone's happy, making sure everyone's comfortable, all of those sort of things ramp up.
Well, if we said that there's a duality in every emotion, we talk about this with masculinity and femininity and things like that. There's a divine masculine, there's a lower masculine or toxic masculine or whatever. So it could be argued that there's a purposeful rage and there's a destructive rage,
right?
And equating one with the other and vice versa. Whoa, calm down. Mic stand is a great way to let the more negative version completely supersede the value of the emotion in general.
Yeah.
Especially if that's what you're taught.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you're taught that,
all anger is bad.
All anger is bad.
All sadness is pointless.
Weak. Yeah.
Or weakness or whatever you want to call it.
Dressed up as that's it, then you supersede the other things. But then, as I said, on the flip side, we can do it with more of the positive emotions as well. And, I had a really cool experience with this with one of my clients where she felt an overwhelming sadness. Like she was just sad all the time. And we dug in, all of those sort of things. And like I found out that she had actually shut down her happiness because like she was taught from a young age that she wasn't allowed to be happy. You know, so, right? Interesting.
I think I've met more people that I'm happy with, having met them, who genuinely doubt they have the capacity to be happy, let alone create a circumstance in their life where that's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, like to put it mildly, it's kind of disappointing on their behalf that that's where they've come to.
You know, and be
disappointing is not a strong enough word, but you know what I mean.
Well, that's it. To be like completely shut down of that, like the only thing you feel is the counter opposite.
Yeah.
You know, and like same thing. It all stems from what you've been taught is good, bad, right, wrong. You know, and you base everything off that. So yeah, if you shut down your anger, then depending on what is the opposite end of the spectrum for anger for you, because anger is like an extremely, as you said, like, you know, good anger, bad anger, but there's like, it's an extremely versatile emotion where it is also like a primary and a secondary emotion. So whatever is on the flip side of that, you know, whether, you know, as I said, just a generalization, a lot of men get taught that showing sadness, like crying or being sad, is a sign of weakness. Showing fear is a sign of weakness. You know, so they shut those two down, but they will express anger in times of sadness and in times of fear and go into attack mode.
I've had this conversation with a couple of friends of mine where I've actually categorically said, look, the majority of men, due to opportunity or emotional stuntedness, I'm happy with that, only really experience the secondary emotions, and mostly it looks like anger, confusion, or indifference.
Yeah.
Knowing that the inability to be present with or process a more primary emotion leads to, I guess, those three things as either detachment, complete bewilderment, or lashing out.
Yeah.
That create a whole new set of emotions based on what they actually see themselves doing and that, and then a whole new set of repression, and then a whole new set of overwhelm, and then a whole new set of repression.
And the cycle continues.
So like what we were saying in the first couple of minutes about like humans, emotions are so interwoven within us that we're barely human without them. So pretending like you can cut them off because all you do is experience overwhelm when you experience them because you're just not that good at processing them. Like, why wouldn't you want to cut that off if all you experience is overwhelm? But there's an inherentness to experience life with emotions. So you always come out of that detachment into emotions again. Right. But it's inevitably overwhelming. So, as you say, the cycle continues. And weirdly, there's this whole series of avoidant behaviors that create maladaptive processes, all that sort of stuff, without ever actually realizing that all of this shit is going on in the back of your head, shadow.
Yeah.
And here we are. Cool. There are so many more tangents that could be going on with that. It's like, I think we could talk about domestic violence. We could talk about codependency, toxic relationships.
And we are so
wound
talking
buddies
about
and stuff.
we are so talking about that. But probably in another episode.
Yeah, not today. Different day.
Otherwise, we'll be in tangent land for the next 5 hours.
That's why I stopped myself, because I'm like, there's like 6 I can think of, but that's not what we're here for today.
Right, that's it. So, like a very important part of, you know, your journey, whether that is healing, whether that's personal development, whether that's like, you know, breaking the cycle, breaking the curses, is being able to not only just identify, but also regulate and process your emotion. But on top of that as well, actually bring back all of the emotions and feelings that you have disconnected. Like, as you said, like if, you know, when men disconnect like sadness or fear, they come out in like anger or confusion.
Yeah. Like why am I angry?
Yeah.
Why am I scared?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not allowed to be scared. Why am I scared?
You know,
something absurdly oversimplified as that. But
and so we need to be able to bring those back and accept love fully with all those emotions. And that comes with like a full fucking level of vulnerability on like both ends of the spectrum, right? So because
the whole gambit,
like
all of it,
you know, to be able to start like owning your own feelings is one, validating for a start, you know, so like, why am I scared? I'm not allowed to be scared. Well, actually, no, you are allowed to be scared.
You're alive. You've got things that worry you, like really, really big sharks, for example.
Yeah. Why am I angry? I'm not allowed to be angry. Well, actually, you are allowed to be angry. This person just stomped all over your boundaries, and you're allowed to actually voice, you know, why this is upsetting for you.
Yeah.
And this also comes with a massive level of communication.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's like if you can't articulate and communicate where those boundaries are, yeah, then you're the asshole.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and like that whole level of communication also comes with a whole level of triggering, because, you know, if someone has never brought anything to you, or someone sort of said, hey, like, I'm not really happy with this, or this is really upsetting to me,
you don't really know how to do it for yourself, right?
And then that kind of gets brought in, turned around and projected back out as an attack. Oh, you're always talking down to me, or you're always criticizing what I'm doing. Yeah. It's never good enough.
What were you saying about gaslighting?
Right. Hello, gaslighting. You know, which is not actually taking in what someone has said as a really raw, vulnerable point of them, then shut down. Yeah. You know,
a level of defensiveness that is unproductive, to say the least.
Right. Yeah. And I know, like, I went on a wee tangent of, like, you know, two people here. So bringing it back to self and sort of working within yourself, within your emotions and your shadow, like, why would that be important?
Yeah. I think it's building the tool set to be able to sort of put a finger on things as well. Like there's a language you need to learn that makes sense to you about what this feeling state could be described as. Oh, my chest is really tight and it feels restrictive. I'm struggling to breathe. How do I say that?
Yeah.
Well, usually anxiety is the word, but it's not exclusively. What if it's something else? So, like, being able to put words to things that are really difficult to describe adequately, let alone to someone else who doesn't know what you mean when you use this kind of word compared to that kind of word, is a whole new thing for most people.
Right. And, like, you know, on top of that, as we've said before, like, they're indicators, they're, you know, signs, they're signals, there's, you know, they're there to show you that something's happening, whether good, like, not so good, indifferent, where you need to possibly pay attention.
I think the part of your brain that processes language and the part of your brain that regulates emotion are literally not connected. You have to pass those neurological synapsial signals through like 7 other parts before you arrive at the bit that tries to make sense of things in a vocal way. why wouldn't that be true within yourself as well?
Right.
And the idea that like these are all signals, it's sort of the necessity of going, signals to what? Like, where do I feel it? What does that correspond with? Is it hot? Is it cold? Is it tight? Is it painful? Is it an ache? You know what I mean? Like, I've kind of got off on another tangent there, haven't I?
That's all good. I love it.
But just like that communication with yourself about what's actually going on for you.
Yeah, that's it. Like, what's happened? Okay, well, what am I feeling? I'm feeling this. Okay, well, why am I feeling this? Okay, well, and then validate, because we suppress when we turn around and go, well, I'm not allowed to feel that. Yeah. And I'm going to say there is a difference between validating yourself and also being able to openly hold space for someone to know that you may be feeling something, but that doesn't mean the person on the other end did something to you on purpose. Like a trigger, for example. Like a trigger is...
You made me feel like this.
Yeah. A trigger is an event essentially encapsulated in time, that is wrapped up in emotion, like everything else. Now, that is time-stamped within your timeline, within your body, whatever, but that is time-stamped, and the events that caused this, trauma, whether big, little, emotional response, whatever the case may be, if that was never processed and dealt with, that's going to cause a block. And that whole event is over. Like, years have passed, whatever the case may be. You may be in a barbecue with friends or whatever else, and something happened that has triggered the same emotional response that is encapsulated within your timeline due to the trigger, had nothing to do with that event, but it's the same emotion that is going to take you straight to that emotional event.
The emotional body wants to make associations. It wants to be able to label something and protect you from the same thing not happening again. So it gets you angry quicker.
Whatever the trigger is, whether it's fear, whether it's anger, whether it's, whatever the case may be. But that happens. So you are 100% valid in feeling that.
Your feelings are your feelings.
Right. But no one essentially on purpose, unless they're a full-blown fucking narcissist, no one essentially on purpose made you feel like that at an innocent event. So the level there is being able to validate yourself because, hey, yes, I'm allowed to feel this. This is linked to that. But that person did not actually hurt me. So projecting onto that person is not going to be ideal.
Again, like we talked about it last recording. It's like, it might not be your fault, but it is your responsibility. They're your emotions.
Yeah, so...
Like there's only one person who can process and help you manage them.
So then that is looking into, why you're feeling like this, what happened, moving through that, whether that's like, healing, whether that's inner child healing, whether that's, like trauma healing, whatever the case may be. All of those encompass doing shadow work because all of those encompass you breaking off parts of yourself. And all of those sort of things. But being able to then identify what you're feeling and why is essentially the first part of understanding what is happening.
Well, it's that ability to sort of step back from it just a little bit and just create a little bit of objectivity to go.
Hold space for it.
Yeah.
Sit into that uncomfortable space because on top of that as well, like we're all taught, one, that we're not allowed to have these things, like why are you angry or whatever the case may be. But then the second thing we are also taught that if we ever felt those things is to get rid of them really fucking quick. Yeah. And that tends to be like maladaptive.
I don't want to be dealing with your anger.
Yeah, maladaptive behaviours.
Sit in the corner, face the wall or something like that sort of thing.
Which then leads to, like self-soothing, addiction.
Yeah.
All of those sort of things for your nervous system to try and realign itself in the only way it knows how, to get rid of the bad feeling.
Yeah.
and being able to sit in that uncomfortable space of like what you're feeling and why, what have you disconnected, why is that, you can then begin that integration process with the emotions that you have kind of disconnected.
I want to say you are not your past. Your past is not you. But that doesn't mean that the brain and the heart don't want to make associations that would make us disbelieve that and build out narratives that travel all the way down your timeline
100%.
to make that not true.
Right.
Yep, that's what I meant.
Exactly right. Well, like, you know, how did I come into your house today?
You've had better days than yesterday, yes.
You know.
But that as a thing, like we talked about it as like, you know, you've done this work so that you're across that. But the next phase is this work so that you're across that, because as much as your past is a part of who you're becoming, would you ever choose to stay there as that person?
No.
But we do.
Right. Well, that's
and,
it.
And maybe shadow work's the choice to do things differently.
Yeah, exactly. Is to, you know, be able to look into all of those parts of yourself, you know, because that's it. Like, even when I came in today, it was just like, yeah, I had felt like something had happened. There was an incident that happened, kind of made me feel like what did I say? I can't remember.
You said a lot of things.
I did say a lot of things. I'm trying to think now.
You kind of felt like you were sweepable under the rug.
Yeah, well, essentially like a blow-in, or I just was like, you know.
Sky will be fine.
Yeah.
Meh.
Like just sort of.
You were treated like beige.
Fucking beige. Right. And like I looked around the whole situation and I could see why I was not shoved in a corner, but, you know, why.
That's how it felt.
Yeah, exactly. But then that feeling then associated back to my own childhood, where I was essentially, you know, like, Sky will be okay, was not thought of, like,
yeah,
you know, all of those sort of things. And it took a little bit for me to sort of like come down from the anger and the frustration, because like I knew, you know, when I was asked if I was okay, and I was like, yeah, no, I'm fine. And I'm totally not normalizing saying you're fine when you're not. But I was in a space of like, if I said something now, I would totally react.
Yeah. And
I needed that time and that space to sit and respond and actually discover, because it wasn't until I'd actually gotten home that night to go, oh, I get it. This is why this is such like, you know, why did this affect me so much? You know,
and, you know, like sometimes it helps to be asked the right question at the right time by the right person as well. So you can like, you know, because obviously I'm taking all the credit for this conversation.
Right.
But that as the context of like, if you have that person who you trust to hold space for you so that you can empty your handbag out on the floor to look at it for what it is rather than be caught up in it.
Yeah.
And find it difficult and challenging to really understand yourself, let alone do anything about it. It's so counterproductive, which is not a comment to be taken personally.
I know. But that's it. It's just being able to sit in that uncomfortable space and go, okay, well, what's happening? You know, where do I need to look? And a lot of the times when we, you know, look at like emotions and shadow work, it's identifying, you know, are there mirrors? Like anger, for example. Like if you've shut that down, I'm not an angry person, I'm not an angry person, I'm not an angry person, I'm not an angry person. You can say that enough times until you sort of kind of believe it, you're going to have a lot of really angry people in your life because they're like over exaggerating, but they also have such a negative association because they may be doing a lot of like judgment or like projection, you know, more like attacking anger rather than
they're almost validating your reasons for not wanting to embrace your anger.
right.
They're like, oh, well, if this is what I look like when I'm angry, I'm not being that dude.
You know, that's it. I don't want that. But that's, again, like a very dysregulated version. Just as much as, like, what can happen is when you know, if you have shut that down and when you do get angry or when you feel that anger or you really feel it, like, I don't know if you're anything like me, before I sort of like, yeah, I'm a fucking angry person at times, I would cry, you know, and even still today I'd get angry and I'd still cry and I'd be like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I'm just really fucking angry. They're like, well, why are you crying? And I'm like, because I literally don't know what else to do right now.
It's a proverbial emotional release. It's that off valve
I need to
that
get
allows
it out.
you to get something out
Yeah.
in a way that may have been a learned thing to avoid what traditional anger looks like, or it may have been a far more sensible decision
Right.
to let anger out in a way that doesn't create more problems on the other side of it. Because at least if you're crying your way through it, it's enough of a signal to sort of help you pay attention, to put it mildly.
Right. Well, that's it. Well,
But it means you're not going to go and stab Steve from down the road because he played his music too loud and this is the fucking last straw.
right. That's it. Because, yeah, when you don't release or when you don't process and then release that emotion, it gets stored. You know, so crying, as you said, is a release.
Yeah.
You know, screaming is a release. Punching a boxing bag
I was
is
about
a
to say
release.
trashing a kickback.
Trashing a kickback, it's a release. You know,
Journaling's a release.
like we get that too. Like a lot of the men that I work with, when I get them to start, you know, really processing their emotion and releasing it, I send them to the gym. You know, because they're like a lot of the men that I work with, they have this real rage within them and they're like, I'm so scared to let it out because I don't want to hurt somebody. And I'm like, wicked, go deadlift.
Yeah.
And they look at me really funny. And I'm like, no, I want you to put all of that anger and I want you to push it through your arms into the bar and I want you to lift, you know, and like they're like, oh my God, Sky, thank you so much. I'm like, that's cool. If you feel like that, go lift, go kick a kickback, go release it into a space where it is safe to do so. Guys, like throwing tomahawks at targets is a fucking thing and I've always wanted to do it, right? Like, rage rooms are a thing.
Can I make a suggestion with the axe throwing?
Well,
If you do it angry, you're going to throw it harder than you perhaps meant to with not quite the right technique, and those things bounce back. So, like, pick and choose your range is what I'm trying to say. Anyway,
but that's
there's
it.
not to devalidate the suggestion. It's more just like, even then, it needs to be intentionally channeled.
You know, and for a lot of women, the same thing when they want to be able to let their anger out and like not cry, like in my case. You know, feminine rage is like a real thing. Go into a safe space.
Does anyone think it's not a real thing?
Oh, there's some people that think it's not a real thing.
It's awkward for them.
I know, right? But go and scream. Use your voice, which is really awesome to practice using your voice, whether it's screaming or whether it's, because that's going to allow you to hear your voice and that's going to allow you to then use your voice in future, not necessarily to scream at people, but to be able to communicate.
It's funny. I'm glad you brought this up because one of those ways in which we can sort of recognize what emotions are coming up for us is to sort of pay attention to what is going on in the body. So that as the really good example, like if you feel something and you feel like you're quite tight in your throat, as an example, like we're about to go into more like chakra conversations, like you progressively shut down your want and capacity to vocalize how you're feeling, that's where you feel your anger like manifest a lot of times. Like you get a dry burning throat. It feels like you got a lump in it. You can't swallow because there's a part of you that knows that something needs to come out, but a more trained part of you is cramming that shit back down. So like that as a tool is another method by which, like, how do I stay present with it? Like, what's actually coming up from it? Where do I feel it? As it pairs along with, like, what do I feel?
Yeah. No, I really like that because that's so true, because that's it. Like, a lot of people don't speak because they're like, oh, if I speak, then I'm going to make other people angry. Hello, people pleaser. You know, and it's just, no, you need to be able to use your voice, because the more you shut that down, the more the bounce back is going to be. Like, I'm pretty sure 99.990% of you have seen the beach ball analogy. You know, what you push down will come back up 10 times as hard. So if you smush, you know, your anger down, if you smush your sadness down, like whatever the case may be, I'm just harping on anger because it's very relatable.
It's the most obvious one.
Right. But if you push that down and you push it down and you push it down and you don't release it and you don't process it in any way, shape or fucking form, it will blow up. And a lot of the times it comes out in the most, volatile, but not only that, it's like
just over nothing.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to think.
Like the word you use, blow up, like it's exactly what it is, because the lid just goes, we cannot hold this shit down anymore.
Yeah.
And the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back might be, your kid said darn once, and you're like,
boom, you know.
And you've just exploded, dropping F-bombs all over the place.
Right, and you're just projecting all of this anger onto your child, onto your partner, onto whoever.
Onto a thing that really didn't.
Yeah, who really didn't actually do anything. But it was just like, because you'd been holding it on for so long, it's just going to go bang. The same reason with, you know, with your shadow selves, with trauma, with all of this sort of stuff. If you push down that stuff hard enough, it will come back. And a lot of the times, and I've had this happen with myself, your shadow selves will take over.
I have some people I care a lot about who describe that exact thing, that they do not feel like they feel disembodied. Like they're almost in their own mind going, I don't want to do this. I don't want to say that. Why am I saying this? And they've just got to deal with the aftermath, because there's such a disassociation with that aspect of themselves that it feels like literally another personality.
Yeah.
And then the you that you think you are just gets to step in when, you know, scorched earth has happened and you feel like you want to apologize, and you get to feel all the shame. The problem is that it's kind of you that has allowed this. I'm going to be careful how I say that. And I find it particularly ironic that Sky immediately folded her arms when she knew what I was about to say.
Right.
I'm about to say, you let this happen, not because I want anyone to feel like they're being blamed. It's not about victim blaming, but it's about the level of influence and input you have over your own life that has been given away and superseded by maladaptive behaviors that leave you being fucking miserable, or whatever version of unfun you want to call it.
Yeah.
And ultimately, like you mentioned vulnerability, I don't know, half an hour ago. It's like that ability to be present with that vulnerability is kind of what allows you to own that you kind of have let some stuff happen that you are now paying for on so many different levels. And that's kind of that another step in the necessity of confronting and being self-aware enough about yourself to do the shadow work that needs doing, so that this isn't you anymore.
Yeah.
Because it never was.
And it is, because you are all things and all things you, but to more create that balance and that healthy relationship between, like, all things. and all parts and all traits and all behaviors and all emotions and all feelings and all this sort of stuff. So you don't go from one to the other or 0 to 100 because, like the pendulum can only swing so far before it comes fucking back again.
And when you were using the beach ball analogy, like the whole time I was thinking it always pops up. Always. It always swings back. The spring always coils back. The only way it doesn't is if you just cease to exist anymore, which, is a thing, and hopefully no one's thinking about that while they're listening to us.
So, with all that being said, and I know we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but like, what are some things that, like, our feelings or our emotions can be telling us that if we shut them down, we completely bypass? Like, I know I work because I work a lot with women, and I work a lot with boundaries, and I work a lot with like breaking generational curses and healing people pleasing and all of that fun stuff. So I work a lot on identifying what the signals are. Like, a lot of the times, anger is to let you know that a boundary's been hit. Like, something's happened, that is not in alignment with you, that is not in alignment with your values, that, that intuition to say, hey, that something's wrong.
Who you are is being messed with.
Right, exactly. And, then being able to communicate that and all that sort of stuff. But also, like going back to, like that sacred rage, that feminine rage, anger is also an incredibly vital part of healing because, when you hit that point of being angry, you've hit that point of like,
shit needs to change.
And not only that, I like to identify it because like a lot of people, they don't see their worth. And I'm like, you are literally speaking your worth right now.
Yeah.
Like, you, that little part of you that's like, I'm fucking worth more is like, bitch, listen.
Yeah.
But then on the flip side of it, like, not hanging on to that anger is also completely and fully important as well.
So
because that does damage.
Yeah.
And like not only to the outside, but like physically damaging internally. Like body.
There's scales of vibrational frequency, right? So obviously the higher the frequency, the more you're in ecstatic joy and enlightenment and sort of neutrality and all this sort of stuff.
All that fun stuff.
So you've sort of put it in context. It's like anger is higher than I think most people would give it credit for.
Oh yeah.
Like so there's shame and there's guilt and there's things like that. But like to counterpoint what you just sort of said, it's like, well, I'd rather you be angry than stuck in a shame spiral. Because you can do something with anger.
Yeah.
As long as it's kind of what you said, mate. It's that step to get to the level beyond. Maybe it's courage.
Yeah.
Because that's, from memory, the first labeled frequency that seems to be not the traditional negative versions of things.
Well, that would make...
Like it's a step ladder.
Yeah, exactly. And that would be the next step because when you think about it, like, vulnerability is courage.
Yeah.
And you start to be really vulnerable. And I'm not talking about like, petty crap, but
I think revenge is the step after anger, because revenge is anger with action. I might be remembering that wrong, but like, yeah, yes, I just said I endorse revenge.
But to like caveat that, like, the best revenge is to
ascend
and let go.
Yeah.
And literally take your power back. Like, what better revenge is to be, like, well, you don't bother me anymore. Like, you have no like power over my life. This is great.
Well, this is the bucket of crabs conversation again.
I
I don't think today is the day to really dig into that one, but that's kind of what it is. It's like, well, I think I mentioned wound buddies about 40 minutes ago. And this idea that, like, do you want to be on the same level as someone who treats you like that?
Yeah.
Just because they treated you like that.
Yeah.
Like you said it before, mate. Like your anger is trying to tell you that you're better than that.
Yeah.
And not from like a judgy, shamey place. It's just like, this is not where you belong.
That's it. You need to move. Like, and the whole concept, and I know this has been spoken about a couple of times, but I'm going to speak about it again in more of a spiritual level. The whole concept of a twin flame and the fact that your twin flame is to like destroy you until like they ascend you is like complete fucking bullshit. It is like they have used that and manipulated that as some sort of spiritual narcissist like stuff to say, oh, it's okay that he treats me like that because he's my twin flame. Fuck off. Like,
I've never heard that before.
Have you not heard that?
That is
Oh my god! The first time
uncool.
the first time I heard it, it was like from a client, and he was telling me about it and all these twin flame journeys and stuff like that. And in my brain, I'm like, oh my god, this is not cool. And I'm like, I try to say, I'm sorry, sweetie, but no amount of trauma it like allows you to disrespect, treat someone else like shit just because of the shit.
So, I'd argue that the point of it being a twin flame is it's an attempt to burn off all that old shit that you don't need anymore. The proverbial dead wood, the crappy scaffolding that's actually restricting you now, not growing you.
Which is where, like, you know...
As opposed to the person who burns you at the stake.
Right. So that's it. The concept is all relationships are designed to trigger. You know, if you're both in a healthy relationship, then you both will understand, communicate triggers and, like, you know, as you said, burn that old scaffolding and ascend. But the concept of like, oh, you know, he treats me like shit because he's my twin flame is like, that is just...
It's like you're gaslighting yourself.
Right. You know, you are making it okay. You're using spiritual terminology to make it okay for someone else to treat you poorly because they are dealing, you know, not dealing with their own stuff.
That's like Wound Buddy 101 in my book. It's like the whole point of someone on like that kind of dynamic is so that you feel normal for feeling like a piece of shit and being treated accordingly. And vice versa. They get to have someone to treat like shit so they feel powerful and cool and awesome. Yeah. Because obviously that's how you'd feel.
And a lot of it is like, you know, them attacking each other and it's just like, oh... watch me bash my head against a brick wall, like, you know, hello toxic positivity.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, the lump will go down after a while. It's just, you know, probably well after they've broken up. You know, they need to.
Right. But that's it. So, you know, understanding, like, back into this, I went off on a wee rant.
It's fine.
It wasn't even a tangent. It was a rant. Like,
anger is better than indifference.
Right. But, you know, being able to have all of those gifts, all those, you know, things that a certain emotion, because that's what we're talking about right now, have.
Because they are gifts.
They are.
Make no mistake.
Right. Like as I said.
It just hurts sometimes.
Right. Like as I said, boundary is there to, you know, anger is there to show you what a boundary is. It show you to that something's hit your core values is to like light shit on fire. No, it's to light shit up and go, we need to move. We need to do something. You know, like sadness is there. Like I believe that sadness is there to help us to be able to, you know,
it's almost discerning.
Yeah, it's to go, okay, like, you know, things make you feel sad. It's to show you that you have empathy. It's to show you that you can actually, you know, look at someone or talk to someone or be in a conversation with someone and, you know, listen to their story and, or, you know, or if you're anything like me, cry in movies, you know, we're like, oh, that should make me sad.
What if it's also the counterpoint of like, sadness is there to make you realize that you're capable of empathy and ambition for that.
Exactly.
Like it's like, oh, I know what it looks like to feel this way. How do I align myself and create circumstances where I can feel the opposite?
Yeah, that's it. You know, it's to show you that you have things like, you know, empathy and all that sort of stuff, which, you know, empathy is a completely normal human trait. Like, you know, unless, as you've said, you're a psychopath and you don't have that hardwiring. But like everyone, 99% of people can look at someone else and know, you know, depending on how dissociated and shut off they are.
Yeah, I was about to say a lot of people have to choose to do that.
Right. You know, I'm just thinking of me because I look at people and I can see the fucking patterns. Like you know, and I can see what is happening, you know, and yeah, that makes me feel sad. And sometimes, you know, it doesn't mean I'm necessarily taking their stuff on either. But then also it, you know, like sadness and hurt, it shows me that, like, you know, shit can hurt and that's okay.
Yeah. That must have mean it was treasured in the first place, or it means you can treasure something on the other side of it.
Right, you know, and like same with grief. It's being able to remember someone who's passed.
Yeah.
And like have gratitude for who they were or how much of an impact they had in your life, even if they haven't actually passed, because, you know, I will totally do an episode on like grieving people that haven't passed, but you know.
That's like 6 weeks time, guys.
But being able to have all of those things within you is like an absolute gift.
So I'd argue that you are not human without them, to the point where when we were talking about those definitive clinical psychopaths, I'd go so far as to say that they're almost not human, simply for the fact that they're not capable of that level of empathy. And if you really want to get woo-wah about it, it's like we aren't human without the capacity to connect and without the emotional capacity to enable that connection. Like what are we?
Well, yeah.
Meat popsicles not piloted by spirit ghosts.
Yeah, apparently we're supposed to be like human robots or something like that, because that's it. Like the generations, the eons of conditioning that have taught you that emotions are bad or feelings are bad, or, you know, you are not allowed to have this or that, and you must be completely just fucking dissociated and be a robot, you know, is pretty much to condition you to stay the same and not grow. Like, as Todd said, like, human beings thrive on connection. It is like, it's a fucking antidepressant.
We are built for it.
Like, we thrive on it. We're built for it. You know, like hugs, you know, are known to be, you know, like antidepressants. And
7 a day. You laugh.
I love hugs.
The study is that it's, if you have 7 a day from someone who's at least vaguely cool is essential for emotional regulation, enabling that higher level of vibration as well, sort of thing.
Yeah, you know, and then you can go even further into that and things like gazing and stuff like that, where you literally just sit and look into someone else's eyes for a period of time. And like, how many of us have been taught, like, oh shit, he made eye contact, look away.
Yeah,
you know,
well, it's awkward, it's uncomfortable. Like, okay, in case it needs saying, no one's sitting here saying emotions are fine, they're not challenging, you need to just get on with it. Like, it's not like that. But like, I'm about to bring up Carl Jung again. But his idea about the collective unconscious is, I would argue, exactly what we're talking about now. It's this idea, this such an undercurrent level of connection with every human around you, whether that's shared experience or something far more metaphysical and quantum realmish than that. That is almost what you're here for. Far be it from me to try and tell everyone what the meaning of life is, but like, tell me that's not part of it. I'll probably debate the topic, if not fight you about it.
But that's it. Like, there are parts of you integrated within you that are there for a reason. They are there to show you, to teach you, to guide you, you know, all of the things. And when you disconnect them and put them into the shadow, like, you lose that part. And you wonder, and this is what, like, guys, this is one of the biggest signs that you have disconnected parts of yourself, is if you feel like there's a hole in you that you're just trying to fill with stuff.
Sounds like Addiction 101, but, you know, that's definitely another episode.
You know, that there it is, because, like, that hole is there because, you shut parts of you off.
Yeah.
You know, and
you can't flow into your own. You can't flow into your own hole.
It's a bit early for that.
Can you see why I paused in the first sentence that I was like, do I say that? It's super creepy. I'd like to think people are going to give me the benefit of the doubt and go, yeah, I know what you meant, mate.
Well, if you've made it this far and you're like, well, I can't handle this crap, then that's okay. Because, it's, shall I say it's going to get worse? Or
it's not going to get better.
Well, it's not going to get fluffy.
Yeah.
It's going to get better. It's like the whole nice kind thing. Like,
sorry, I mean, there's still going to be these weird things that, let's be honest, both of us will say that in hindsight we're like, that was way creepier than I meant it to be, and that's just how it is today.
Yep, that's just it's Monday night
Mm-hmm.
when we're recording this. Oh dear.
Anyway, flowing into your own whole sky. Where were you going with that?
Done.
Okay. Let's see if I can salvage my reputation here.
Nope. It's cooked.
There's not enough time for that, is there?
Okay. I'll sit it down.
Glad you're enjoying yourself.
I get so many mental images.
That's on you. It's got nothing to do with me
I
anymore.
know. Mind out of the gutter, Sky. Mind out of the gutter. So.
All right, I tell you what, I'll say a thing and you can go in the corner and calm down. About half an hour ago, I said something tentative along the lines of, and it wasn't creepy. I said, you're probably going to have better luck disassociating from your own thoughts than with your emotions.
Right.
I would argue that Jungian psychoanalytics, and the point of it being to dissolve your ego, Buddhism, and attempting to dissolve the self, and another Eastern philosophy orientated practice known as Taoism, which is just trying to dissolve the concept of you're trying to embody no mind. And to my mind, they're all talking about roughly the same thing, where you're trying to dissolve that part of you that overthinks things.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that to say that those practices are there to disengage that volume of thought process, to re-engage and be more present with the emotions that make you you and make you human. It's a working theory. But that's how it would make sense to me, in that, and that's what I meant when I said, like, you'll almost have better luck just paring away layers of thought process to become more authentic and vulnerable with the feeling patterns underneath that. Because it almost ends up being more you for that. You feel more like you.
Yeah, definitely.
You're not over-consciousness is concerned with what everyone else thinks or what you should have done or why you're horrible for saying that bad word to the wrong person or making your podcast co-host almost cry from saying creepy stuff. I say almost cry.
Almost. That was... I love a good laugh cry, right? But hey, like, that's joy. Like, honestly, just to, like, fucking laugh. Like, creepy stuff. But just to laugh and be able to, take the funny out of... I know you were trying to be, like, quite philosophical and stuff like that.
Well, in the end...
You kind of went kind of down, but that's okay. But, like, have a laugh with your friends. Like, that is still...
Well, it's part of the gamut of human emotion.
Right.
It wouldn't have value if you didn't have sadness to know the counterbalance of it.
Of it, right. That's it. Like, as I said, with, like, working with people you know, my own experience, my own education, all of the things is like, when you disconnect your happiness so much that you can't even see like small joys in things, you will overcompensate within your sadness to the all you see, all you feel, all of those sort of things where, you know, energy focus goes where energy flows.
Yeah.
So if your sole focus is on one thing because you've disconnected the other, then that thing's just going to grow.
Well, that, and like we mentioned toxic positivity in the last episode. It's like it's the complete disconnection of more traditionally acknowledged negative emotions. Like that positivity loses all value at that point. It's like it almost becomes a facade.
That's it. And
it's a brainwashing.
Well,
it's got nothing to do with you and everything to do with what you want to project.
Right, that's it. And I can see that we're like, you know, going into the hour. Go us. So this may be a part 2, but one of the interesting things that I find with emotion, and like when we're looking at, you know, what emotions they have disconnected and what ones you're over-exaggerating and all of those sort of things, is a lot of people, when they come to me, which is, you know...
Now who's making it creepy?
Now who's making it creepy? No, but when I talk to people, I believe that everyone, like, come to me and they're in pain. They have a lot of, like, you know, a lot of more of negative association emotions, you know, all of this stuff that they've been stuffing down has popped back up. And that's like, you know, because it's popped back up, it's like, you know, I'm here, bitch, look at me. So it's like the only thing they can feel. Yeah. And they almost like disconnect their love. They disconnect the love for themselves. They disconnect the love for others. They disconnect like that thing. But interestingly enough, like everything comes from that space. You know, like everything comes from that love space, you know.
You said it a while ago in this episode. It's like everything stems from self-worth. And I absolutely agree. I feel like that's what you're talking about now. It's like the ability to be worthy of love, your own love first and foremost, let alone anyone else's. That's what I feel like you're talking about.
Yeah, that's it. Because, and, you know, one thing I help when it comes to, you know, helping people identify and regulate and process and accept these things is, you know, they want to have more self-love. And it's like, well, you can't have anger without love. You can't have happiness without love. You can't have sadness without love. You can't have you can't have any of it without love. So it's still there. Because
otherwise things don't mean enough to get angry about, to get sad about, to get frustrated about.
Exactly. So, you know, that in itself is like your biggest, you know, emotional shadow is, if like I'm total assumption, is like if you're struggling with your own self-worth, with your own self-love, is like, you know, bring back that.
I've lost count of how many footy teammates I've had who get like annoyed or getting butterflies before a game. And then you just reframe it for them. It's like, that just means it matters to you, mate. That's a good thing.
Exactly. And on top of that as well, just to like, you know, I'm going to take over your like sciencey physiological. Fear and excitement actually have the same response in the brain. The only difference is breath. So if you're feeling fear about something, nervous about something, butterflies, all of that sort of stuff, yes, it's because it matters. But on top of that, breathe. Because that fear is coming because you're holding your breath. You know, and if you allow yourself to breathe and flow that through, the excitement will come. Or if you can just identify it as excitement.
The physiological symptoms are literally exactly the same.
Yep.
Your heart rate comes up, your blood pressure comes up. The excitement of your own neurology, it's all exactly the same. It's about a framing.
Yeah.
And how your breath responds to that.
And I'm talking about like things that make you nervous, not things that are making you unsafe.
Yeah.
Just want to add that in there.
Like, do you think Usain Bolt would have ever said he's nervous about his next race?
Right.
It's like, No, I've got winning to do, bro. Watch me. Hold my beer. That feels like a good place to like call it even.
Yeah, hold my beer. Right. I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's nothing else to bring up that's not going to turn this into an hour and 20.
Right. Or like a 2-hour thing.
Which is going to happen one day. But
Yeah.
that's for then. Cool. All right. Dunsky?
Dunsky. I love it.
All right. In that case, be smart, be kind, no bar fights.
No bar fights.
See you guys.
See ya.